Welcome everyone for today's AVDF Cafe. This is our third and last session for year 2022. And it had been really great talking to you all, getting feedback from you all. Here we come with new topic. With me today, I have my colleague Angeline, and she will be talking about Oracle database auditing best practices. She has put together a very informative slides, and I feel that is going to be a really great session. And once she will done with her part, I will give you a sneak preview of our latest release of AVDF, that's release update 8. What all new features are there, and I can just give you a little bit overview, and maybe next time we will have a more detailed session on new features. So Angeline is based out of India. She covers all database security solutions. Many of you might be working with her directly. If you have any question related to AVDF, you can use Q&A channel, and we will try to answer as much as we can, or otherwise you will have our email IDs as well, and you can drop your questions to us on one-on-one discussion. So welcome again, and let's start our session. We will have polls in between. Today's agenda is, like I said, Angeline will first cover that why do you really need to audit database activities? What are the driving factor behind it? What are the key reasons that you should audit database activities? Followed by what you should configure, like the best practices, what all kind of event you should be auditing when you have Oracle databases. So she will talk about that, and she will give you some very good audit recommendations, tips and tricks to make your system more efficient, give better visibility that what's happening on your Oracle database from the auditing perspective. And lastly, I will cover RU8 new features. I will give you a sneak preview on new an introduction of RU8.
So good morning, everybody, and thanks for taking time to attend this cafe session. I know like many of you are benefited a lot with these cafe sessions, and we hope to, as well as what we share things, we would like to hear your feedback to improvise some of our recommendations, our features. So you're welcome to use the Q&A panel as I go through the flow to provide your feedback or your suggestions on how we can improvise these recommendations. And if there's something that I haven't covered as part of these audit recommendations, please feel free to suggest them. So the topic for, as Nazia was mentioning, one of the critical pieces that you would expect in any kind of a DAM solution is like to have the auditing of the database activity. And it's quite crucial, not just from the regulatory compliance point of view, especially in India, APAC, there are like regulatory bodies which are very keen on having all the activities tracked in the database to provide an assurance to the regulatory bodies that data is used only for the purpose for which it is meant to, and also to provide documented evidence. But also it helps a lot in forensic analysis. For example, if there is some kind of an anomalous pattern, you would want to see what happened to the data, like who did what to which piece of data. So getting this whole piece together is something which you would expect the database activity monitoring to be able to meet up to those expectations. And of course, you would want to detect any kind of anomalous detection kind of things, any suspicious access patterns, which you would want to detect it quite early in the time frame rather than it becoming a full-blown breach. So these are the top 3 use cases why we would typically need to audit database activity. The unified auditing, as I was just mentioning, it started in 12C. Oracle 12C, we introduced unified auditing, and it was in a mixed mode where you had a flavor of traditional and unified. Earlier, prior to that, when we started with Oracle 7, it was traditional audit, the standard audit flavor, where you had all the statement audit, privilege audits, and all the sys operations were audited. All those kind of things were configurable using the standard audit. We also had the fine grain audit and the different kinds of the XML auditing, the OS auditing, those flavors were there with the standard auditing. And in 12C, there was a introduction of unified auditing, which changed it's a different paradigm altogether. So there are like a lot of benefits, a lot of good features that we introduced with unified audit. And for the people to become familiar with unified auditing, we had something called as mixed mode, which is a flavor where you had both traditional and unified, and it did give flexibilities for the end user to play around with the unified audit while the traditional audit was still in force. So you could create those unified audit in parallel to what you had in traditional, and you could make sure that you're not missing out any of the good features, and then you could turn off the traditional audit. So there was this configuration which we provided from 12C, which is called mixed mode. And slowly what we are getting to is like in Oracle 19C and 21C, you would have seen this announcement in our documentation saying traditional audit is deprecated, and 23C, we did introduce a lot of new good features and robustness around the unified audit, which is just coming up. And if any of you have subscribed to the beta programs, you would get to see what are the good features that we have introduced in unified auditing. And in somewhere not so distant future, we would be looking at de-supporting the traditional audit. So in a way, like unified auditing is the path forward, and we encourage all of you, like I think most of you, like 50% of whoever's joined, like you do use a traditional audit configuration, or probably you're using the mixed mode. So maybe you can make plans to move to the pure unified audit at some point in 19C or 21C while you're starting to configure. And by the way, like all our autonomous databases don't have tradition. It's just the pure unified mode. So if you're running anything on the cloud, you would have seen that it's just unified audit. So mixed mode was just to enable that transition. And we expect more and more customers to move, and they're already moving. Like I've been working with many of them in the field to enable this transition. So if you have any queries or if you have any concerns, you can always reach out to us. Okay, so that said, now what's unified auditing and why it's quite interesting? Why is it the path forward? So we have quite a lot of features. One of the important features, like if you are used to traditional audit, you would see the audit records in many of files scattered everywhere. For example, like your the standard audit, it goes to the DBA audit trail. FGA audits, it goes to the FGA audit trail. Or if you have configured database vault, it goes to its own audit trail. So unified auditing is gives you a single consolidated view of audit records. So you don't have to go to different places, but we have a entity called Unified Audit Trail Exposed, which actually consolidates all the audit records coming from the different component. And of course, we have different mandatory audits which are configured. These are kind of always on audit, because we know some of the activities that happen in your instance need to be audited. They are very security relevant. So we do have always on audit configurations which are turned on by default. And there are like several predefined audit policies. And in a minute, you will see like these are very easy. It's a single click provisioning option that you get from either AVDF, Oracle Audit Vault and Database Firewall, or if you're using the DataSafe cloud service, it's just a single click provisioning option from any of these DAM applications. And then you can configure a lot of conditions to get the precision. You don't want to be auditing everything that happens in your database. You would want to be selective and focused enough to audit just what you need and what your compliance needs are. So Unified Audit gives you that way to configure it so selective enough. And then the entire audit trail is extensible. So we do provide like out of box fields, which we know that the audit would require. But if you were to bring some of the application attributes, for example, you might want to bring in the the end user like transaction ID or any of the application attributes, right? If you want to get them into the audit trail, we do provide that flexibility to bring anything to everything over to the audit. And it's a simplified manageability because you define the audit policy once and you can enable for different kinds of labor. Like you can enable for all users, you can enable for set of users, you want to enable it for all except few users. So those kind of different manageable options are provided with Unified Audit, and it's quite secure. And this point is quite important because this Unified Audit Trail, there is no DDL or DML operations that are permitted on the audit trail itself. And all those attempts are mandatorily audited. So the audit trail itself is quite secure. And we have controls like TDE and database vault realms around these audit trails to make sure it's protected even from the administrative users. And compared to the traditional audit, there is a lot reduction in the performance overhead. And I have a slide talking about the performance improvements, like a couple of instances where the customers have shunned away from using the traditional audit. They have gone back to reevaluate the Unified Audit. And I'm glad to see that many of them are happy after adopting the Unified Audit in their environment because it's of the much performance improvement gains that they have noticed. Okay, so coming on to the first point, I'll emphasize on each of these important points so that you're aware, like the entire breadth of why Unified Audit is quite crucial and more flexible compared to the traditional audit. Now, some of the mandatory audits which we configure, which we enable out of the box, which are always audited, are like the top level statements of administrative users, any attempts to modify the data or the metadata analysis schema, database vault configuration changes, or any changes, executions of DBMS audit management package. And if you're using anything on the cloud, like there are a couple of activities that are audited by default, like any activity by cloud operations, login failures, password changes, or execution of certain important procedures like UTL packages. So these are all audited by default. These are the extra ones that you would get to see in any kind of autonomous databases. Now, coming to the availability of predefined audit policies, which are available for single-click provisioning, there are tons of them, like, secure config and login failures. These are enabled by default if you were to, use any instance 12C and above. So you would see both of these enabled by default. The rest are available. It's provisioned, but you have to enable them with a single-click option. And these are available from DataSafe or AVDF. And there are relevant dictionary views that we provide, where you can query and see, like, what is available, what's enabled. And coming to the flexibility of how you can configure conditions, like we do give different flexible options. Like you can have a when condition where you can bring in some of these session context variables like sys context, user env, whatever is available in the user env. Or if you were to create a named application context, yes, that can also be used in a when conditions. So you could use something like when my IP address is so and so, you can, or when it is not in the trusted IP, you can audit every connection that comes into my database. Or maybe if you want to audit certain data pump operation, we do give you a component level based audit where you can say, you can monitor the data pump import export activity. Or say like you want to audit all the users who are granted DBA. So there is way you can enable this audit policy for all the folks who are granted the DBA. Or if you want to say you want to audit everyone except a particular kind of user, you have an accept clause where you can provide. So with such configurations, the benefit is you can create very precise kind of audit policies to just audit what you need in the database. And we encourage you to leverage these conditions, these flexibility, the top level option. I don't know how many of you are aware, we have introduced this top level, which gives you only the user defined whatever activities are done by the user, end user, only those are audited. So it reduces a lot of audit record volume because the internal operations are not audited. So only the user initiated operations are audited with top level. So use all these, leverage them to make it more precise, more granular, to audit just what you need. And of course, coming to extending the audit trail to include any of the application attributes, there is a way you can create named application context and then carry over. For example, in this sample, I have an e-business context named application attribute where I'm bringing in the service name, module, and client info into the unified audit trail. So you create this application context in your session and then populate these service name, module, and client info. And when you run any audit configuration, these are captured into every unified audit trail record that gets created as part of the audit policy. So there is this way you can enrich your audit trail to bring in any of the user-defined attributes to suit your compliance need. And one of the instances where RBI recommendations, they have provided a couple of their transaction, like the end user core database transaction, the core financial transactions ID was requested in their document to be passed on to the unified trail. And we are working with a couple of customers to use this feature to extend the unified audit, and it has been a success. And coming to the performance point of view, like in our internal tests that we perform with TPCC, this is observation, like even with 6,000 audit records per minute, it's a mid-single digit performance overhead. And even if you were to do extreme auditing, for example, if you were to audit all application auditing, we don't want you to audit everything from the application tier. There is room for kind of fine-tuning that portion. But even if you were to do the extreme auditing, say for example 30,000 audit records per minute, it is still a single digit. So like though you get this performance benefit, we encourage you to actually fine-tune these audit configurations to reduce the performance overhead much below. So, and there are like different ways where you can fine-tune these audit configurations and incorporate the best practices to make it much into a negligible performance impact. And it's a more practical way because we have worked with a lot of customers to fine-tune these configurations, and they have not reported any performance impact with unified audit. And with pure unified versus the mixed mode, which you get by default, if you were to use 12C and above, there's further improvement of 1% with pure unified. And that's the reason we encourage all of you to move to the pure unified mode if you are using mixed mode, because mixed mode is only for the transitioning phase where we want you to get comfortable with the unified audit policy configuration. Once you are comfortable, once you know what the performance impact is, you can turn off the traditional and use only the pure unified to get the maximum performance benefit. So let's look at some of the ways where you can configure effective auditing to avoid the efforts to to reduce the audit noise. Or if you want to find something, it's like you have to search tons of record, but it's good to fine tune these audit in a way that you have what you just require, and you can spot out any kind of anomalous behaviors or anomalous access patterns in a short time. So what are those principles of configuring the audit. And these are the recommendations that you would see in the technical report. The technical report link also, I think I've shared in this PPT, which would be circulated to you. Like, take a look, because many of these are something that we had got the feedback from many of you from the field, and we have incorporated these recommendations, and we are improvising based on your suggestions as well. So if you have any of the audit compliance needs that we haven't incorporated yet, or it has to be incorporated, you can reach out and we would be happy to work with you to incorporate that audit recommendations as well. So the three principles that we suggest for starting to configure any audit policies, looking at the privileged user activity monitoring, because privileged users, as you're aware, it's like they are the soft targets for hackers. So it is critical to monitor the activities of the privileged users. The second category is the security relevant events auditing. So for example, like some kind of the activities like your fail login attempts or your schema changes, those needs to be audited at any moment in time. And then is the sensitive data access auditing. So if you have sensitive data, like any kind of access attempts to access these sensitive data, those needs to be monitored as well. So we'll look at how you can start configuring and provisioning the policies around each of these categories. And before I go on to each of these categories, it's not like a rocket science. Many of these policies are available as options for single click provisioning from AVDF or DataSafe. So based on the need, based on your compliance requirement, all you have to do is just click this one in you would see this page in the auditor's console of AVDF. And when you go to the audit policies for that target, you have to just click them and provision it. So some of the guidelines that we would want you to adhere to is we don't want you to duplicate mandatory audits, because it's always on, it's enabled in your database. So for example, like if there are admin operations that you want to audit, you don't need to do it, because admin operations are mandatorily audited, or any of the, for example, you don't have to create audit for tracking attempts to modify odds schema, because it's always already there. So some of these mandatory audits are already there running, so you don't want to duplicate it. And these are well published in our documentations. So what kind of mandatory audit happens in your instance? And leverage these predefined audits. These can be provisioned from AVDF or DataSafe, or it is defined in Oracle database also, so you can enable them directly in your database as well. And if you have to create some kind of custom audit, it would be something which is quite context dependent in your environment. For example, you might want to bring in, for example, in your when conditions, you might want to bring in your trusted IPs to exclude the untrusted ones, right? So those kind of audit use case where you might want to create your environment specific scenarios, there we encourage you to create the custom audits. For all other purpose, the predefined audit should serve its need. Now, coming to each of these three categories, right? The first one is the privileged user activity monitoring. Now, there are three different kinds of privileged users that you might want to audit. One is the administrative database user accounts. One is the user accounts with direct access. And in a couple of the compliance guidelines, we have seen that this is emphasized. Those who have direct database server access, all their accounts are documented to be audited. And then there are categories like high-risk database user accounts, because they do have access to your sensitive data, or there could be third parties in your environment who have access to your internal system, which we categorize as high-risk database user accounts. Now we'll see for each of them, how you can start configuring them. Now, coming to administrative database user accounts, the first thing is how do you identify itself? Who are the accounts who have admin privilege? You could use if you are using the data safe, you could use a user assessment report, or you could use a DBSAT report. Either of you will give you a gist of the user accounts with administrative privileges. And our recommendations is like, anyway, as part of mandatory audit, when the database is closed or mounted, all these administrative users are audited by default. During the normal database operations, there is an admin activity auditing option that you would see in the AVDF. You can just enable them to capture all the top level actions for these administrative accounts. Now, coming to the direct access, this is a sample direct DB. This requires your the custom audit configuration, and we encourage you to create a similar one with the top level clause and with the IP address set to null, and this actually does all the BigQuit connection auditing. So any connections that happens over the BigQuit or any direct access will be audited with this command. So we encourage you to configure this custom policy, and it's quite crucial because it comes in many of the compliance. At some point, we are planning to provide this option also from the DAM, like AVDF or data safe, but at this moment it is to be created as a custom audit policy. And then if you want to audit certain high-risk database users account because they do have access to sensitive data, they are non-admin but privileged users, there are options like user activity auditing or all top-level actions in the database, which are provisionable from AVDF. You can give the set of users to be precise when you configure. When in the single-click option, we also give you a way to to specify what are the users or what are the roles that you would want to audit, and there you can be very specific about these users and you can provision them. The second category is a security relevant events. These are activities within database that warrants a lot more scrutiny. For example, like security management events like your parameter changes or key rotation, your data security, your policy changes like your redaction, VPD, RAS, or any of the TSTP policy changes, you might want to track that. Any of the database management operations like your backup, cloning, alter database, all those admin operations needs to be tracked. Any of the schema modifications or any of the account and access management like your account, user account creation, grants, revokes, your system privilege usage, or any kind of operations with data implications like your data pump, export. All those account and access management events need to be audited, or any kind of the suspicious user activity events like your multiple failed login attempts or sudden activity in the dormant accounts or your non-business hour operations. These kind of events need to be monitored. Let's look at each one and what are the policies that are available. For security management event, like you can just single click option of critical database activity, which is available in AVDF. Data security, if you were to use any of these policies, right? Redaction, VPD, OLS, database vault, TSTP, XM policy, you can create these the custom policies and provision them. Of course, the database vault policy changes are mandatorily audited. RAS, you have predefined policies which are available for single click, and the exempt you have secure config. So it's only redaction, VPD, OLS, and TSTP. You have to create these audit policies in the target database as custom policies. For any of the database management operations like your RMAN, tablespace operations, altering database, mostly it is like RMAN events are mandatory audited, sys activity is mandatorily audited in an unmounted state. And as we've seen in a slide back, like you can enable the predefined activity, admin activity auditing. And secure config does most of these alter database system operation tracking. So only thing is you have to configure the custom policy for any table space changes. Data schema modifications, we do have data schema changes predefined policy, which is again available from AVDF. Now coming to access and account management, Again, like critical database activity monitors every account and access events. And the system privilege and privilege use, again, this is again, you have to create custom policies because you have to analyze in your environment what privileges are used, what is unused. And we do provide a feature called privilege analysis, by which you can actually get a report of like, what is being used, consumed, and it's being used, or what is unused. So if you want to keep some of these used ones, it's good to configure audit on them so that whenever it gets used, you get to monitor it. If they are unused system privileges, consider removing it. But if it's something like, like in year-end processing, you use some of these system privileges, you would still want to monitor them. And you can create the audit policy for tracking whenever it is used. So I've not given the syntax here, but if you were to refer to the technical report, the entire syntax on how you can create that custom audit policy by looking at the privilege analysis, it's actually outlined there. And there is a cool way to monitor a baseline and monitor any kind of entitlement drifts within AVDF. And I believe Nazia would have touched base upon that in earlier session, or we can have a separate session based on how you can monitor. But this is one of the cool features that we provide in AVDF, where you can visually monitor the drifts that is taking place in the entitlements. Now, coming to database management, like any kind of components with data implications, you have policies for database vault, and you can configure custom policy if data pump component is being used. Now, coming to some of the abnormal access patterns, right? The multiple failed login attempts. You have a way to turn this on, log off events from the AVDF. And dormant account, you can again set this ORA top level actions, and you can specify the dormant users. Non-business hour activity, this is quite specific to your environment. So we encourage you to create custom policy with the application context representing date. This again, the syntax is outlined in the technical report, but I just want to mention here. So this might be a little overwhelming, but if you see for most of the things, like we do give single click provisioning options. So as long as you're aware that most of them are available for just single click provisioning option, you are, it's like, granted that you're taking it, it's quite easier to configure. So there is no rocket science involved. It's not, the custom configuration is only meant for something which are very specific to your environment. Rest, everything is available as a single click option from AVDF or DataSafe if you were using the cloud service. And now coming to the sensitive data access auditing. So how do you audit your sensitive data, right? And these sensitive data is again, like quite context dependent, like what is sensitive to one organization may not be sensitive to another organization. This is mostly, you have to configure the custom policies, and we do provide the recommendations. For example, like there are different categories, right? Like for example, the sensitive data that is accessed through the application service account, you would want to audit only when it comes from the untrusted path. The trusted path, your trusted servers, your trusted IP address, you don't want to audit even because application service account itself is kind of an authorized one. So only when those access to sensitive data comes through an untrusted factor, only those you might want to audit. And if it is directly being accessed, not through an application service account, you might want to audit. And if there are some sensitive columns with PII data, you might want to audit that. And if there is any user access to sensitive data that is not coming from the allow list, which is trusted one, not coming from the watch list, which is coming from users who are authorized to directly interact, any other access to sensitive data, we encourage you to audit. And we'll look at each of these categories in detail. So first is identifying what your sensitive data is. And we do give you different options, like in DataSafe, it gives you a way to configure your SDM, and that gives you information on what your sensitive data values are, how much of sensitive data you have, what are the sensitive objects that hold these sensitive data. Or you could use a DBSAT report, or if you're using the enterprise manager, you could use the application data modeling. So these three sources will give you the landscape of your sensitive data. So once you have sensitive data, you need to determine who can access the sensitive data, who are my authorized users who have access to the sensitive data. If it is application service account allow list, it is a higher risk only if the data is accessed outside the trusted path. If it is within trusted path, you may want to configure a lower level of auditing, or you can skip the auditing completely. But if these are from the untrusted path, there is a higher risk. So you would want to incorporate that trusted path in your when condition. And I'll come to it in a minute on how you can add that. And if there are database users who directly interact with data, but they are authorized as well, it is a higher risk. So we would encourage you to audit. Attempts by anyone else, it is again a higher risk, and we want you to audit. So this calls you have to categorize those users and roles into one of these categories to structure these audit policies. So for example, like for application service accounts who are authorized to access the data, we exclude the trusted path with the when condition. For example, in this sample, you would see when the app user context is not an HR manager, you are auditing everything, right? So, and auditing everything is only top level. So only the user initiated actions that come in is audited. And you are enabling it for roles or specific kind of roles. So you can be making it quite granular to just audit whatever comes from the untrusted path. The second is whoever is interacting, the authorized users who are interacting with sensitive data, but they are not the application service account. So you can enable these policies for those set of users who are authorized to access your sensitive data. The third category is attempts by anyone else. They are not in the allow list. They are not in the watch list. So you include everything who are not in the allow list, watch list with an except, and then say monitor everyone else. So in this way, you can make it much more modular, but this requires one to see what the sensitive data is, who are the users who are authorized, who are directly interacting with these sensitive data. And once it's there, you can create these custom audit policies. The other category is like if there are sensitive columns with PII data, like you would want to monitor them closely. We encourage you to do with the FGA audit policy, where you can say, you can pick up the column level as well and say any updates happening on salary column of the employees table, you would want to monitor. And if you have a way to say, track these transactions, if the salary is greater than a particular threshold, we allow you to enable these conditions as well in the FGA. So there are different ways you can further fine-tune the FGA policy to just audit what is required. And FGA also provides you a neat way to configure the audit events, the event handler, so you can trigger the notifications if there is an update of salary about 10,000 that is happening. And one of the features that that 23C introduces is a way to this was available in FGA. If anybody has configured the audit policy for tracking any PII data, this was available only in FGA. But now in 23C, you have the unified audit also. It can enable the columnar access. So you can say You create an audit policy for tracking salary updates and employee in the unified audit policy as well. Of course, that will not allow you to do event handling, but with the unified audit policy also you can configure. So that's one of the things that's available in 23C. And if you're interested in testing that out, you can enroll for the beta program. We have provided the scripts for you to test that out. Okay, so that's on the PII data. And this is a way where you can monitor. So for example, you want to monitor them visually from the AVDF. There is a way where you can import the sensitive data that is discovered in DBSAT or Enterprise Manager ADM into AVDF. We do provide these options in the auditor console. And once you import it, we have a certain set of category reports called data privacy report, the GDPR reports, where you can see what activities are happening on the sensitive data. So what are the sensitive data? Who are accessing my sensitive data? Who are the privileged users who are accessing my sensitive data? All those are visually presented to you. But all this requires you to create the audit policies as well, tracking its access in the database. So in summary, database auditing is kind of very crucial. There is no alternate to database auditing, right? So it is required to meet your compliance requirement. If you want to support your forensic analysis or you want to detect anomalous access pattern, database auditing is the way to go. And with unified auditing that's introduced in 12C, it gives you a way to configure precisely the way to configure what auditing is required in your database. Instead of auditing everything that is happening in your database, it's good to have it more focused, more selective and effective, for not just for your performance benefit, but for supporting forensic analysis. It is quite critical that you have it very selective. And creating effective database audit is not a rocket science. We have a recommendation based on the 3 principles: privileged user activity monitoring, security relevant event auditing, sensitive data access auditing. And most of these recommendations are exposed to you as single click provisioning options. So wherever there is a requirement from the compliance or from your security division, right? Like you just have to provision them with a single click console. It's only where you need your environment factors, like your trusted path, your sensitive data or sensitive users, the users who need to access your sensitive data. It's only for those corner use cases where you need to create the custom policies. The rest of everything is easily provisionable from AVDF or DataSafe.
Okay, thank you so much, Angeline, for the very informative session. Okay, so quickly, I want to update you on release update 8. That's our very latest RU for Oracle AVDF 20. So the focus for RU 8 was that we have fixed many bugs, which includes customer focus, security focus, as well as internal. So every time when we come up with the new release update, we make sure that we pick a latest database release update for our embedded database, that's Oracle, and we take any changes or latest patch set for our Linux, that's an embedded operating system, or any CV being reported. So we try to take all that in RU to RU. So that's why I say that security fixes, internal as well as customer reported fixes. So now RU8 more focus was on, very first thing was the stability. The second thing was usability improvement. So we went through AVDF 20 UI pages again and again, and we did a lot of review on that area. And you will find when you start using RU8, you will find that, there are small changes, but bigger impact. So we really hope that when you use RU8, you'll see the ease of use improved. So we we try to make a usability improvement there. The very important part in the last part for RU8 focus was documentation improvement. So we went through a lot of chapters, documentation of AVDF. I know it's a solution which is heterogeneous, so there are a lot of complexity involved in different architecture, in different infrastructure, etc. And everything has to be properly documented and written, and at the same time it has to be very simple for you to use it and read it through. So what we did, that we call it something called a cross-functional review. So not the owner of that chapter, we try to get it reviewed by somebody else, so they get a new fresh look or a new perspective to it. And we did a lot of documentation improvement also. So these are the three, I would say, focus area was for RU8. Yeah. So now from the new feature perspective, apart that whatever improvement we did, our development had put a lot of time and effort in coming up with new feature, in which, flagship new feature was read-only auditor. A lot of customers were asking for that. They wanted a auditor user with read-only capability only. So whenever there is an audit going on, they just have access to the reports. So they should not be able to define the policies or alert policy, etc. But they should be able to see alerts and they should be able to see the reports. So read-only auditor was a flagship new feature, I would say, that in RU8. Apart that, we have done under usability improvement, we did a lot of things like revamping multi-stage database firewall policy. So I have a snapshot for that and I will show you some of them. And what we did that we extended database firewall TLS support for RAC targets. We in last RU7 we were supporting Oracle database standalone, but could not extend it to RAC targets because of some deadlines to meet. But with RU8 we are able to support database firewall TLS support for Oracle RAC targets, as well as we have extended database firewall support for Oracle autonomous databases, which was not the case. So earlier for autonomous databases we were supporting auditing part of it, but we were not supporting database firewalls. So we extended that support with RU8. When you go through RU8, you will find a lot of hints and labels change. So we try to make those labels more contextually, which can make sense while reading it, and wherever we feel that the user need a guidance that what they should do next. So we have put a lot of hints. So I will show you a couple of snapshots there. Apart that, we have revamped, for example, configuration page of Active Directory and LDAP, and we expanded platform support for newer version of Postgres, MongoDB, and VMware. Yeah, so now read-only auditor. As auditor, you go, you log in, you create a new auditor, and you make an auditor type as read-only. And then later on, you can go and modify and assign the targets that you want to give to that particular auditor. Let's say if it's an auditor who is doing an audit for your GDPR compliance. So all the targets under your GDPR group, for example, you can assign to that particular auditor and they can review those reports. Or that, let's say there is an auditor for RBI or PCI kind of activity, you can give a group of target under that category to that particular auditor to review the report and review the alerts, etc. So your dashboard will show, once you log in as a read-only auditor, your dashboard will show data particular to the targets assigned to you. So database firewall landing page, we have changed. If you remember, it was horizontal. So you have user-defined database firewall and a predefined predefined database firewall policy, we made it vertical so that in one go you can see all policies which are defined. We were trying to reduce as many clicks as we could. So in one glance you can have a view that what are the user defined and what are the predefined database firewall policies are there. And similarly, we have changed the way you define your database firewall policy. That's the next slide, Angeline, please. Yeah, that's more about the landing page. So you can see on which target it is and all that. Yeah, and just build that slide. Yeah, thank you. So here again, you will see that, one by one, when you are defining database firewall policy, you have to go one by one horizontally and click on the rules. Unless you click on that particular rule, you don't know whether the rule is there under that condition. Is there any rule defined under that category or not, or how many rules are defined? We have changed that view as well. We have made it vertical, and wherever there is a rule defined under that particular category, by default we are expanding it. We did some color coding so that it can attract get your attention. So we are trying to do a lot of usability improvement, and in one go you can see how your database firewall policy is the policy look like, right? Your all rules are listed, whatever you have defined. So in one glance you can see that how your database firewall policy looked like. Yeah, so we have made some changes in database object selection as well. Remember, so we added some hint. You can just go and click on the pen and select any type of table or upload it through the file, etc., which was not there earlier. Just next click. Yeah. So target registration, like I said, that we have extended support for autonomous database. So while you are defining your database firewall monitoring point, you can go and you can let user know that whether this is autonomous database or not. There are, like I mentioned, updated hints and labels are there. So one of the example that for templates, we used to write PDF or XLS report, which we changed to report templates because they are actually report templates. We have, for example, when you're defining the rule, we have added updated help page there so that you know what exactly you need to do on your rule page. For example, if you are selecting a statement class, etc., what each class means, etc. So we are trying to create a lot of help hint so that your user experience improvise here. Next. Yeah, so these are I would say that majority of highlights or a new feature that we have added in RU8. We would like to do a detailed demo for that, maybe in the AVDF following session. So I would say that after this session, your call to action is that you go download RU8 patch either from Oracle support, or you can go to eDelivery website and download fresh install, and you can apply that patch. If you're existing customer, you already have AVDF on any version you are running. Good part, I would suggest you can go and have your proactive SR maybe created, so that if you get any issue while doing update, you will get attention immediately. It's very important that you update to RU8, because next release RU9, we're gonna make some major changes, and it's better if before you apply RU9, if you are on RU8, it's gonna be much better scenario, I would say that. And like I said, that RU8 focus was making it more stable, and we have fixed a lot of bugs, customer internal and security, etc. So it's good to apply RU8 as soon as possible.